IISD is in Paris for the UN climate change talks, reporting on selected side events. On December 9th, the Africa Pavilion organized a panel about the role of renewable energy in Africa's future development plans.
It's a very transformational moment for Africa. We've had very fast rates of economic growth for the last decade and a half. Coming out of the lost decade of the 80s, there has been substantial growth. We have Africa rising, industrial output is up, the middle class is increasing, and we're expecting that we will have a tripling of energy demand by 2030 to fuel the future growth of Africa.
If we have to grow, we have to integrate ourselves. If we have to grow, also we have to plan big and large, not pico, micro, small, medium. No.
In the next 5 to 10 years, Africa will have to make infrastructure investments that will amount to about 300 gigawatts of capacity. We believe that at least 80% of that capacity potentially can be clean, renewable energy.
During discussions, several experts highlighted the role of Agenda 2063, a framework document which will guide Africa for the next 50 years.
This Agenda 2063 really has a story. You know, in 2013, 2 years ago, we celebrated the 50th anniversary of creating the Organization of African Unity, which became later the African Union. So it was a big event, a big occasion to evaluate what we did during 50 years. And also it was important to see and decide where we want to go. What kind of Africa that we want after another 50 years.
Renewable energy is no doubt part of Africa's development plans, not only because it will help with economic growth, but also because it will become an essential tool to win the fight against climate change.
Currently, although Africa accounts for just about 3% of global power consumption and only 1% of world carbon emissions, on our current trajectory of growth, emissions are predicted to increase in line with the continent's living standards increasing, and energy demand which is expected to soar by 77% from current levels by 2030.
The Africa Clean Energy Corridor is an initiative put forward by the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. This initiative calls for the use and trade of renewable power in a continuous network from Egypt to South Africa.
The African Clean Energy Corridor initiative was adopted in January 2014 by ministers of energy from Eastern and Southern African power pools through a communiqué containing 5 main actions. These were namely zoning, resource assessment, country and regional planning, developing an enabling framework for investment, and capacity building and public awareness.
Without the corridors, we are not going to be able to have the efficiency gains and the scale of investments that are required. So that's why it is fundamental for us to keep expanding the opportunities offered by the corridors, and I think now that we have Eastern and Southern Africa, adding West Africa, it's a big boost in the right direction.
Et je pense maintenant, comme ils l'ont dit, qu'il faut faire la révolution énergétique, accélérer les choses, parce que c'est aussi des éléments non seulement de développement, mais de stabilisation des communautés, de frein aux migrations sud-sud, d'accès à l'éducation, d'accès à la culture, d'accès à l'eau, de lutte contre la déforestation, et donc les projets intégrés dans les communautés villageoises ou dans les quartiers des villes, ça peut aller très très vite. Et c'est pour ça que je vais veiller à ce que les financements promis pour l'Afrique arrivent vraiment aux Africains et aux gens, aux familles, aux habitants des villages et des quartiers, et ne sont pas dispersés ou ne disparaissent pas en cours de route entre les décisions qui sont prises en haut et puis ce qui reste quand ça arrive sur le terrain.
During the side event, we learned about several initiatives boosting the use of renewable energy in the African continent. But is Africa fully ready for a renewable energy revolution? What are the remaining challenges?
For East Africa in particular, the average electricity access is under 20% and low per capita consumption of under 150 kilowatts per hour.
There are a few constraints that we face. I think one of those is that we need a very clear regulatory and policy framework. Much of the investment will come from the private sector. Although we think that there will be public sector leveraging, the bulk of investment will come from the private sector, and that will only come if we have very predictable and very transparent regulatory frameworks. So I think that's the first priority. The second, in our view, is the question of finance. Currently, the capex rates or the risk premiums for investment into renewables is really unrealistically high. The capital cost for renewable energy projects is higher than for conventional. So we think that there needs to be a leveling of the playing field. I think there is a tremendous scope for developing risk mitigation instruments from climate financing for the future, but we have to create a risk mitigation facility that allows much higher volumes of investment into bigger integrated renewable energy markets. And I think that's the future for Africa. We cannot afford a situation where we will lock in carbon-based infrastructure from now for the next 20 years. We have to act now. We have a window of 5 to 10 years, and I think the political will today exists.